Hello folks and welcome. Hopefully you'll have some fun today. I am going to show you how to make a fun backup application using a single text file, and then we can create launchers and make icons out of that to have a little fun, and I can change that to any icon that I want. I'll first give you the example, and then I'll talk about the preliminaries. Zorin OS 17.3 Core is what this is on, filming in 1080 even though I'm in 4K. I am going to be putting a backup copy of this one here. I'm going to recreate it for you. And this is another user from another system, and I'll talk a little bit about that because I'm going to be using the same script file today, and I'm going to explain the whole thing. Alright, so basically I'm making a backup of Gary, our made-up name user, today, of his home folder. Not system files, his home folder. All of his personal stuff, in other words. And this also includes his hidden files. Or I could make it where it doesn't include the hidden files. And this is called a silent backup when you create launchers. You can also run these kind of script files because that file is tied to this file right here. You can also run these by themselves and they'll open up terminal. And depending on what kind of coding you put in there, it's just a couple of letters. It'll display a file list. I'm doing this silently. So it's a script file, and I'm going to actually show you how to create this and break it apart and tell you every single thing that's in there, and it's very small. Matter of fact, I'll let you see it right now. Lines 9 through 12 are just fluff. Okay. So we're going to first start with how you're going to do this and why, maybe. Well, a lot of people like to have a little fun when they start learning Linux, and this is a tutorial. So basically what I'm saying is I'm going to be explaining this in detail. So Linux is for all ages and all skill levels. We have a lot of users that are brand new to Linux. So I'm going to approach it from that aspect of it. If you know a little bit about scripting, that's great. However, I don't recommend most users not to skip stuff because you'll end up not catching a good or an important point, and your scripts may not work right. You want to have best success, I highly recommend subscription. You can watch this in one sitting, multiple sittings, or at your leisure. I have lots of videos like this. So this will definitely be more than 20 plus minutes. All right, we're going to first talk about how we make launchers, and why do we make launchers anyways? What does a launcher do? Well, we have these icons here. They launch something. They launch Chromium. They launch your file manager, your software store, or terminal. Whatever it might be. All we're doing is creating a file and finding an icon to make it work, to launch it. That's what this does. And I can do this with funny icons, or I can do this with serious looking icons. Now, if you are in Linux Mint and you right-click, there will be an option in here to create a launcher. But in Zorin, there is no option for that. However, when you right-click on your Zorin icon and hit Edit Menu, you can create launchers here. If you decide to create that in your Applications menu, it'll be placed down here below. You can see that I created this one here. And I'll show this in a second. However, it's not in any submenu. In other words, if you click through these, you won't find it unless I type for it. I'll just type in my, and you can see it right there. It says My USB Backup. That's exactly what that's called. All right, I'm going to first unpin it, remove it from the panel or taskbar, and then I can add to desktop. I generally do not. I don't like things on my desktop in most cases, or pin it to the dash. A lot of people have different preferences. I prefer this one down here, and it just sits all by its lonesome. Okay. Now this is a silent backup, so what I'm going to do is turn off hidden files for a second and remove that. I'm not going to touch Sam's backup. That was done on Linux Mint the other day with the exact same file I have, just minor changes. So you can see Sam's backup is on that USB drive. I'm going to click that, and it doesn't look like it did anything, but it actually made a complete copy of Gary's home folder. Personal files, not system files. So everything in here that you see, Control H, you can also just click the hamburger menu and click that. That includes hidden files and folders. I also have files and folder names with spaces in them. That's not a problem either for the backup program. But when I get into talking about device names, that's when I'm going to give you the cautions with spaces. All right, in either case, you can see this is the backup copy, and it's identical. File for file, folder for folder of what Gary has. Okay, and I'll talk about why that doesn't say Gary in a minute. So we're going to create a couple of more of these, or at least one more, and that's down, right-click, edit menu. This time I'm going to pick a subcategory. I'll just use accessories because it's the next one in line. And I'm going to create another launcher, but it's going to be to the same file. Okay, so my USB backup 2. I'm not going to use a command, I'm going to use a script file. So first you need to create this, and I will talk about the details of this file, complete down to the last detail. That file is what I'm looking for. To launch it, that's what a launcher does, launches something. We can also use it for commands, sometimes in terminal and sometimes not. All right, I'm going to browse and look for that file. It's right here. Doesn't have an extension, it just says my backup script. I'll talk about that also. Doesn't require a comment, but it's optional. I don't need to launch it in terminal. It doesn't even matter. It'll just still be silent. I do a silent backup whether I do this or not. But I do need an icon. So let me get to this stage for a second with the file manager. Now I have some pictures that I can play with. I'm going to use the butterfly first. And then later I'm going to alter that icon to something in this brought in folder that I brought in that has all kinds of goofy looking icons. I created some of these, modified some of these, downloaded some of these off the internet. All right, in any of the case, I'm just letting you see what the sizes are. So I'm going to pick the butterfly, and I do this through here by clicking that and then finding the folder and then picking the JPEG or PNG, whichever. So again, you just need to place an icon there. I don't require a comment or launch in terminal. I'm just going to click that. Again, that file is the same one that launches this one. So now I'm going to close that and go find it in the Zorin menu under accessories. And you can see it right there. Right click, add to desktop. That would be a double click icon, or pin it to the dashboard, or pin it to the taskbar or panel bar. A lot of people have different names for these things. They all do the same job. All right, since I have, if I click that, you won't see anything happening. So what I'm going to do is have the system recreate that folder. I'm abusing the drive a little bit so you can see it happening. So it immediately created the primary folder and then the subfolders behind it. I have a fairly fast drive. It's a USB drive, but it's fairly fast. I also have internal drives, but that's another video. And if I get enough interest in this one, I will make that one for automatic or automated backups. But this is a manual one. You have to have something mounted. All right, now I'm going to have some more fun. And I know this is a goofy picture. This came from wallpaperswide.com. You can actually see it underneath my panel bar, where it comes from. Maybe the subscription logo may be covering part of that. Anyways, we're going to change both these icons. Right-click, edit menu. That's after it was created. So the first one is actually not in any menu because it's created in here. It's actually down here. It was created the same way with that highlighted. So in that case, when you're trying to find these manually, you won't find them in the menus, but you can just type for it. As in my case, you can see both of them are here. All right, I'm going to change the icons though to something goofy to get your attention. So the first one in here is called that, and I'm going to highlight it and then hit properties. And then I'm not going to change any of the other details except for the icon. So I'm going to pick something goofy out of my little list here. We'll do Stormtrooper here. All right, and then I'll close that and it'll give it a second and then the icon will change. Then I'm going to change this one to his boss. His boss is Darth Vader, if you are a Star Wars fan. That one's stored in the accessory area. It's down at the bottom. It's the butterfly that I'm after. Properties, I'm not changing anything except for the icon. Anytime you create personal icons, I recommend that you create these folders and leave them there if you're going to use them in your system. Otherwise, if you rename the folder or rename the icon, you'll get a blank if you're using your own personal icons. That's just a rule I have, even with other Linux distributions. All right, his boss is Darth Vader. He's got flaming red eyeballs. Why not? Let's just be a little goofy, have a little fun today. And I'm waiting for the icon to change. And now I have both of these. So it doesn't matter which one I click on, they both go to the same file. To prove that, I will have to delete the folder so you can see it being recreated. SAM backup was done with Linux Mint. Linux Mint and Gary on Zorin are both sharing this drive. I will talk about best practices on naming conventions and permissions also. This drive is formatted with extension 4. A little bit later. Now let's take a look at our script file. What is a script file to begin with if you are kind of new to this game? A script file is just a text file that's been converted. If you want to create one from scratch from Zorin, it's right-click, New Document, Text, not LibreOffice. You want a text editor. I have already converted mine, so if I double-click, it'll open it up with a different text editor, but I will open this up with the standard text editor that came with Zorin. Hamburger menu time, it is gedit. There's a lot of small, lightweight text editors out there, and Linux Mint is Xed. This is gedit. I also have a third text editor installed, which is called Kate, which I'm going to be using for highlighting purposes. But in either case, this created a file called txt.txt. It's kind of redundant. Now, if you rename that, you can leave the extension, but to make it a script file, you need to right-click. You'll see no run statement here, but when you click Properties, you change the permissions to allow executing as a program. After you create your script file or commands, then you have run as a program. That's what makes it a script file. Now, I'm going to dump that. This one here, if I right-click, is also run as a program because that is an official script file with permissions turned on to execute or allow executing files as a program. Now, this doesn't have an extension. I generally don't put an extension on script files, but I could. But then I'd have to adjust the launchers if I change its name, because these two are already tied to the same file. So, do you want me to first open this up and do a copy of this backup using terminal, just to give you that example, so you can see the file lists instead of doing it silently? I can do that first, and then I can explain all the settings. So I'll do that first. So what I'm going to do is edit this file, but not using the regular text editor. We're going to be using Kate. Kate is good for highlighting. So holding down the control key, I'm going to spin this up a little bit. Make it larger, in other words. So I'll explain all these lines, but just let me do this first so you can see it. I'm going to put the VH flags on, and then I'm going to run this in terminal. But I'm going to make sure the terminal box is open, which generally is not by default. It's usually exit on terminal. I'm going to hold it open for you so you can see this. Okay, so I also changed the colors. Generally terminal is white. I changed mine to a green tone with black backgrounds, and I do have those videos. Now I'm going to run the file, but actually let me recreate the folder so it'll do the complete list. So I'm doing this without a launcher. I'm launching this script by itself, and it generally opens terminal when you do that. But I turned on the VH flag so you can see it. And then I'll turn them off. It's copying all the files, and then it's done. There's a long scroll bar here. You can see that there's documents in here. There's other subdirectories and etc. And it's holding the box open because I told it to. Child process exited normally status 0 is generally default when I do this. And all I did was put in 2 characters in there to do this with, if you wanted to see the file list. Now I'm going to put the terminal box back to normal. If you haven't seen my video on this, how to change colors and this, you may want to take a peek at that video. I'm going to return this back to normal. All right, I've already made a copy, so I'm just going to let it run so you can see it open and close, and you probably are not going to be able to read much of anything. But I'm not rerunning everything. I'm just letting this thing rerun. I'm just letting you see that it's going to it should auto close. The reason it took a while because it's actually copying the video at the same time. Keep in mind I'm running this as I'm doing this. That's why it hanged for a second. But it still auto closed the terminal. I didn't click anything. All right, now let's open this up in Kate and take this a little bit further. Holding down my control key, I'm going to scroll up. If you do want to install Kate, it's available in your software store. All right, I'm going to remove the VH flags so it becomes a very simple script file because we're going to use these guys moving forward just as launchers. Launchers do not require that. Even with the VH flags and these, it will still not display a terminal box. All right, so let me just do double save really quick, and then we'll talk about these. So let's start with the symbol down on line 12 and having fun. That symbol there in the US is called a pound, or at least I believe that's how it's defined. Some people call it hash. Whatever you call that symbol, it has 2 functions. One is on line 1, it has a very specific function. After line 1, it becomes either blocking commands, in other words, don't process, or comments. So that's what line 9 through 12, they're just comments. So have fun. So this is a dual script. It can be written this way, and you can certainly feel free to do a screenshot or handwrite this down. It's not proprietary. I've been using this for years. And more importantly, I just changed the names. But feel free to copy it as is, and it has 2 functions if you copy it as is. You do not run rsync lines both at the same time. You do one or the other. It's very important you understand that. If I put that symbol in front of here and hit save, it will not process anything. If I hit save now, none of these icons work because it has nothing to do. There's no processing. It treats these like comments, but they're blocking the commands. These are comments, yes, but it's also used for that purpose. So I'll remove that on line 5 and hit save twice. I usually like to hit save twice just in case it didn't take the first time with mouse clicks. So let's start with line 1. The bin bash statement is what I call this. So that one there has that special character and then an exclamation point. These 2 are required. Then you put in a /, not backslash, bin and then bash. When I open the file manager a little bit later, you will see that there's a bin directory or bin folder, and inside that folder is bash. Born Again Shell is what that stands for. So bash, we use bash for like rsync. What is rsync? Rsync is remote sync. It can also be used on your local machine. If you're a Linux Mint fan, for instance, Timeshift is a utility that the Linux Mint maintainers maintain for even other distributions, but that one uses rsync by default in the background. So rsync is found installed on a lot of Linux distributions. rsync is used quite a bit in different backup programs. We're just doing simple stuff today, making our own backup of our own complete home folder. So again, line 9 through 12 is fluff. It's just comments. Kate is a text editor that I use to highlight things. So if I highlight this command here, you can see that it lights up yellow here. Line 3 will be excluding hidden files, not including, unlike this one. This is Gary's home folder. Believe it or not, represented by 2 characters. So let me go back to line 5. So generally what is being processed in this instance when I hit save now out of either one of these icons, because it's looking at this file, only line 5 is being processed. Everything else is ignored except for line 1. Bin bash tells the system to use Born Again shell so we can process rsync. So again, rsync is remote sync and it has a ton of options. If I want to see the file list, I do a VH and then I run the file by itself without the launchers. If I want to do simple, I do that. Now let's talk about the importance of spaces, and then later on, the importance of not putting spaces in your device names. All right, let's talk about spacing of the commands. So when you do rsync, it's 1 space. All right, after the -A, and these are in lowercase letters, this is archive. And again, I'm not using any specialized things, except the archive option is actually very powerful. Then I use 1 space and then a tilde. That's what that squiggly line is called. Go look at your keyboard, your upper row of your numeric numbers. To the left of the 1 is that symbol. You generally have to hit shift. So this represents Gary's home folder, and you're probably going, what? If you've never seen this. All right, let's talk about Gary's home folder for a second. It doesn't say Gary here, does it? No. But this is Gary's home folder. He has also hidden files. Now you see them, and I'll scroll down to the bottom. They all have dots in front of them. Little dot. This is secure shell of SSH. This is dot bash underscore history. There'll be some relationships to think about, why people use underscores. Maybe a little bit about device names and script files. But in either case, hidden files are being viewed. So I'm going to turn that off graphically. But it doesn't say Gary here. Well, actually what it says is if I turn on Control L is home Gary. Now why would that say home Gary instead of just /Gary? I do have the complete file system for Linux as a link to a university in my About section on my YouTube site if you subscribe, if you want to read all about the file system. But this is your Linux file system. There's bin right there, as in bin bash. This is a link to bin, but in here is bash, Born Again shell. We're talking about the home folder currently, and why it says home Gary on it. Because you could have extra users. If you saw my video the other day, if you're a Linux Mint fan, I did one for Cinnamon where it had 3 users here, because that's the master home folder. That's why it says /home. This one does not. This one says home/Gary. All right, so that's why that says that. Now, let's move on. I don't type in rsync-a /home/Gary/ because that takes me way too long, and this script file I can't use elsewhere unless I do all kinds of modifications. So I put a tilde there and / so I can use this elsewhere. This is the exact same file I used on Linux Mint. Exactly the same, except I changed this and that made all the changes. Well, I did it on both top and bottom lines. But this script file is identical if you go look at that video. So that's why I use a tilde on it. So I can use this on all the different Linux systems. rsync space 1 space -a 1 space tilde /. Then 1 space here also. That's wrong. Won't process. 1 space. Some people like 2. Whatever floats your boat. I like 1. At least 1 space. Now, where did I get this Media Gary USB backup? All right, we're going to talk about best practices later about actually formatting and naming convention and then permissions, because I'm going to suggest you format these with extension 4. But you can see that I'm pointing at it with my yellow mouse cursor or pointer, that it says about an inch below that, maybe an inch and a half, it says /media/Gary USB backup. Well, that's what this system is calling that device. You can certainly hand type that into your script file. I suggest you just click on it and then hit Control L as in Larry. It highlights your address bar. Right click with your computer mouse and copy that. And you can minimize it for a second. I'm going to put it on line 7 so I don't mix it in here. And now you can see what I just copied. So I would move that into this position here. A lot of the Linux distros do not copy the extra / and some do. If you don't copy that, I will basically make mention of the fact that I'm going to actually just do this really quickly. I'm going to cut that. So if you typed it this way, there's a high probability it'll just scatter the files in here, not put it in a clean container. I don't want that because I already have one user called Sam here. He's sharing the drive with this Gary guy, and I don't want that, all over the place. I wanted to put it in a clean container, a clean folder. So that's why I put that in there. So if it is not here, you add the extra / and then you put in whatever the file name you want. This is a made-up name. It has nothing to do with your home folder. Okay. The -- delete can be put on the tail end or the front end of the command. It does the same job. It has everything to do with this folder and nothing to do with your home folder. This -- delete on line 3 has everything to do with that folder and not your home folder. Same thing. It doesn't matter if you put it on the tail end or the front end. This doesn't even need to be Gary backup. This is perfectly acceptable. Or we can just do G for Gary. Or G for Gary. I'll do that right now. Line 5 is currently being processed because I don't have that symbol in front of it. So save. I'll minimize the file. Open up the USB drive and hit one of these two guys. It does the same job. And it creates the G folder, the primary folder. Then Gary's primary folders are put in here. And what am I currently doing? I'm doing everything. The home folder is everything in Gary's home folder, not system files. His home folder, all of his personal stuff. That also includes everything with spaces in them too. You will see it in here. My space test folder. My space test space folder. And this one has 2 spaces also. But when we get into best naming conventions for drives, I'm not going to recommend spaces unless you do something with your script files. But this is okay. So I am doing this with line 5. It is literally copying everything with the files. All right, now I'm going to get rid of the G because it makes very little sense and type in Gary backup. And basically hit save. And we're going to get rid of both of these so it'll re-replicate. I'll use the launcher. Okay? And we can see all the folders being created. All right, now let's go switch gears. So rsync, again, space -a, space ~/ 1 space. Media Gary USB is just the name of the drive, and then put another / to create whatever name of the folder you want. And if you want them in sync, you leave these on. And I'll talk about this command a little bit later in better detail, because rsync does not duplicate stuff when it doesn't need to. That's the beauty of rsync. When your initial backup takes longer than your second backup, as long as you don't delete the folder. Now I'm going to disable 5 and enable 3. and hit save. I usually like to hit it twice just in case I missed with my mouse. All right, so this one is going to create a exclusion, except I think what I'm going to do here is this. Yeah, I'm going to leave that folder name alone. And let's add the word 1 on the back on this one. So it'll be a different folder. And then I'll hit save. Let me first just run it for you. It doesn't matter which icon I run. So Gary Backup 1 does not contain hidden files. How do I prove that? Well, I can just turn this on for a second. So let's look at Gary's backup. You can see the dot files in here. They're all over the place. It's even got the .bash underscore history. And there's a reason why the developers put an underscore there instead of a space. But more importantly, the other one is called Gary Backup 1. It does not contain hidden files. So obviously this backup doesn't have as many bits and bytes, but it doesn't have all the files either. But some people don't care about hidden files, and some people do. I'm giving you the option of both. So I use one or the other command in here, and you can just put the symbol in front of it to block it. So now we're not running this command, we're running line 3. So let me explain this complete detail. rsync again is remote sync. 1 space -a is what again? Archive. 1 space -- delete, no spaces there. Affects your home folder? No, it affects only this folder. As I pointed here, I put it here because I wanted to let you see where it's at. You can put it here or in the front. You can do the same thing with this line. The -- deletes, again, allows us to edit this folder for rsync to remove files. rsync. You can always manually delete stuff. This is doing it automated. You're allowing rsync to remove files out of that folder. That's all that's for. And I'll talk about what happens when you don't put that in there. All right, 1 space after that -- delete. Then we have -- exclude equals double quotes, a period or dot, that little star symbol, and then another double quote. Now this one is very special. What it's going to do, explanation time, it's going to remove all of these extra hidden files and folders, including anything that's in subfolders. It won't be copying that folder either because it's got a dot in front of it. So that's what you're doing here. You're excluding, not including everything. So guess which one of these would be a smaller backup? This one. This includes everything. This is easy to write, but it also is a bigger file or files and requires bigger storage. Are you the type of person that doesn't delete their web browser history for a long time? This will be included in here. Remember that one. It can be a large backup. This excludes those hidden files and folders. So it'll be a smaller backup. So this exclusion has a direct effect on your home folder. It excludes that before it makes its backup or during. The -- delete has nothing to do with your home folder. It has everything to do with this folder. So as long as that's understood, your -- deletes can be put in the front or the tail if you want your files absolutely in sync. File for file, folder for folder, and never delete anything out of here, then you leave those off. That means it'll preserve the files in these folders. It will never delete anything. You'll have to do it manually. But that makes them out of sync also. But believe it or not, there are some people that like that feature because they like to preserve files. Now, without it, it will actually replicate all your files and folders, including new ones and the ones you made edits to, but it won't delete anything. Hopefully that makes sense. That's why that command is called -- delete. All right, we're up to this point. We put in 1 space and again a tilde / which represents our home folder, but we're excluding the hidden. Then we put in 1 space again in between these two guys. Again, my recommendation is 1 space. If you want to put 2, try it. Sometimes I've only seen that on one system where it didn't work right. So I removed the space and it worked fine. So on Media Gary USB back, again, it's highlighted also here, is the USB drive. And again, we're creating a folder. And this time we're creating it with Gary Backup 1, which is different from the other folder. That's why I have two of these. It's Gary Backup 1. I'm going to turn off hidden if you don't mind, Control H. So I have Sam, he's from Linux Mint, and Gary is our Zorin user. We're just sharing the drive, that's it. Okay, so I don't want to mess around with Sam's folders. All right, so either one or not both, let's put it that way. So what happens when you do this and hit save? None of these will work because you disabled the commands. So it's one or the other. You want everything? That's the one you want. Save. You don't want the hidden files, then you want to put a comment here and uncomment this one, if you want to call it comment, hash, pound, whatever. Then it'll only process line 3. It's one or the other, but not both. You'll get weird effects if you try it. And then, of course, if you put that symbol in front of both, it doesn't do anything. So hopefully you understood the process in here, and I'm going to talk about the importance of files. So when we're doing this, we're copying everything. We don't have to put any special characters or different kind of quotes because we're dealing with spaces in file names. Like folder name is MySpace test, blah, blah, blah. And this one has test space 123 space 4. It is actually copied as is. You'll see it in here on both of these. Remember, I did 2 copies. One with hidden, one without. They're both the same. But when I get into actually talking about what rsync does and also formatting, I'm going to first give you the example of how powerful rsync is. You've already seen it copy very quickly. But what you probably don't understand is why I've been doing this -- delete stuff. That's because if I delete test 1, 2, 3, 4, I'm in USB, so I need to be in the regular home folder when I do this. So this is Gary doing some maintenance. Gary is creating and deleting folders. Okay, doesn't matter. It depends on which side of the script file is written right now. That one didn't delete, so it must be the other one. All right, it's gone. It's in sync. The other one still has that. The other folder, I mean. Let me go backwards. It's still here because my script file is no longer dealing with this unless I switch it. So if I alter the script file, again, I like to use Kate because of the highlighting part, I will process the other command. So it'll update that folder. Save. And then I'll walk over to here. I think it's this one. That 1, 2, 3 folder just disappeared. So if you want to make your files absolutely in sync without preserving files, you add those in your script file. I'll open it with the regular text editor this time. You can put the -- deletes in the front or on the tail end. It doesn't matter. That just keeps your files completely in sync, and that allows, one more time, your script rsync command to delete files out of that folder. It has all to do with that folder and nothing to do with your home folder. Same thing with this one. It has nothing to do with your home folder. It has everything to do with this folder. Now let's talk about this drive. How would you format that? Well, maybe you have a different utility. I'm going to use the one that comes with Zorin, disks. Disks is GNOME disk utility. I have 1, 2, 3, 4 drives. This one doesn't have a power symbol. This one doesn't have a power symbol. This one doesn't have a power symbol. That one has a power symbol. These are internal drives. That's not. This is a USB drive. That's how I know that immediately by looking at that. This is formatted with extension 4. And I do recommend that you use that. I also do not recommend spaces in the drive name. I had a user ask me this question. I've seen your video on doing this and it doesn't work for me. And I had a dialogue with that user. I said, what is your volume name? And he goes, it's USB space my stuff. And I said, did you make provisions in your script file for those extra spaces? And he said, I don't know what you mean. That's because when you put spaces in volume names, you need to do something special with your script files. You need to add extra characters. And he went, oh, I didn't know that. Do yourself a favor. Don't use spaces in volume names. Keep them simple. You can use USB. Now I'm going to flip this over to extension 4. Okay, I'm not going to use Lux encryption because of the fact that we have Sam, who comes from Linux Mint, that also wants to use this drive. Okay, I'm not going to format the drive, but just pretend that's the situation. Remember, once you put in Lux, you both have to have the same password to get access to that drive. But in either case, I'm going to use extension 4, not NTFS, and certainly not FAT. FAT32 is file allocation table 32, and it has a limitation on it. It doesn't copy files bigger than 4 gigabytes. And you may have that risk in your home folder. So use extension 4. But more importantly, do not do stuff like this if you want to save yourself some hassle. If you never are going to use script files, I don't see a problem with that. If you are going to use script files, then I would personally not use any spaces. Like that is fine. What do you have to do with your script file? You have to add extra characters to accommodate the volume label or device name into your script file so it can be done properly. Otherwise, you'll probably drive yourself nuts trying to figure it out. This is bad. This I would do before the other one, so I don't have to do anything extra with my script file. What's another name? Well, you could do USB 1 or USB 10 if you got multiple devices, or 101, whatever. No spaces. But again, as soon as you enter that space, you need to fix your script file with also extra characters to accommodate the space in the volume name or device name. Okay, so after you, let's just call it backup, just like I have it, USB backup, hit next and format your drive. Now, the next question after you format your drive, though, is are you going to be using other users? Because generally, when you format with extension 4, we are dealing with permissions. We are permitted to either create and delete files or not. Generally, if you formatted this, you are the owner. In this case, it says me, which is Gary. And Gary belongs to his own group even, but he has no access either. So if you belong to the Gary group, you will have no access to this. You may also see that others have. I did this earlier on purpose to let you see that if I was Sam, I would not be able to copy these anymore. I would actually make sure that he has create and delete if Sam formatted this drive. If you formatted this drive, do the same thing if you're going to let Sam or others use your drive. You want others to be able to create and delete files, maybe. I do, because Sam is well, he's part of the office, or he is our user at home. Let's put it that way. This is for home use. So Gary and Sam belong to the same household, but they'd like to share this USB drive. If you don't want, and you want to be stingy, then you just exclude everybody else and they can't create files after you format it. When you right click, and let's see Sam logged in as Linux Mint, this will be grayed out. Also the delete command will be grayed out, unless he logs in as root. Then he can take over. But do yourself a favor. After you format your drive, if you're going to allow someone else to use it, change the permissions to allow them to create and delete files if you're going to share. If you're stingy, then leave it off. So that's all about sharing. Again, I'm not going to touch Sam's backup. So a recap is you can use launchers. You can run these all by their lonesome if they're written properly. And just remember, if you run it this way, it's going to open up terminal. If you don't have the flags on, this is just has the archive flag on, not the VH. And I will hold the terminal. Actually not. I'm going to leave it default. Let's do it that way first. Let's make sure. Yeah, it's normal. All you'll see right now is a blank text box when I run this. And it'll auto close when it finishes. That's all you'll see if you do not put any more flags on. That's what I'm talking about, putting the VH flags on. See that file list? But it closed automatically because I told it that I didn't want the box being held open. You can actually make have the terminal box open. You can also put echo statements in your script file. I'm not going to cover that in this video. Okay, but in either case, I'm going to reopen this in Kate so we can blow this up. Again, if you want to do silent backups with these launchers, you don't need those flags. But what happens when you leave them on? Nothing, really. I'll have it re-replicate using either one of these. I'll use the Stormtrooper. You'll see no pop-ups, even with the VH flags on. If that's not confusing enough to you. And the reason for that is because I'm running it as a launcher instead of right-clicking and running as a program. That's the only difference. But the VH flags are there. You can see them. I'm running this one. I'll reopen it in Kate. There's a lot of things we can do with these script files, but I'm just trying to make it simple for you so you can have some fun. And again, subscribe and come back and rewatch that if necessary. Thank you for watching.